Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name's Catherine Nagari. I'm the Mayor of Cambridge and Chair of today's Special Council meeting. Before we get started, I'd like to just take a moment and acknowledge some of the big changes we have coming up. A lot of previously closed activities are starting up again throughout the next month and throughout the fall. So it remains vitally important that even as things seem to feel a little bit more normal, that we do continue our efforts to keep ourselves and each other safe. From schools to recreation programs and sports groups, there will be much more daily interaction amongst people throughout the community, especially indoors, and this does bring with it increased risk of spreading COVID-19. Here at the city, our rec centers, older adult centers, and arenas are reopening this month. While this is really exciting news for ourselves and for parents and families, we can't wait to welcome everybody back. However, I do need to urge everyone to remember that we are not out of the woods just yet. Wearing a mask, physical distancing, and good hand washing, all of the measures we've been taking throughout the summer really needs to continue. We've worked hard to hold back a second wave of COVID-19. We'll continue these throughout the fall, but public health is continuing to closely monitor and recommend that we continue to follow all of their recommendations, and we are ready to respond if needed. Lastly, with students heading back to school over these next few days and weeks, I know we are facing a lot of uncertainty in our community. I'd just again like to offer my reassurances that we'll be here to support teachers, parents, students, and the school boards however we can during this transition. Thank you everyone again for doing your part to protect our community. I know it's been tough over the last few months, but we have already gotten this far, and I know we'll continue to work together as things evolve to keep everyone safe over the next few weeks. Okay, let's get started on today's proceedings. As a reminder to members of council and our delegations, in the spirit of kindness and procedural rules, I'll also ask that we maintain decorum throughout our meeting and remind members that using disrespectful language will not be tolerated. I would also like to add a note that as we receive emails and sometimes social media posts, that those rules apply as well. We need to be kind to each other no matter how we communicate. So we're excited to be here with you again, Cambridge, for another special council meeting and another reminder that we're all in this together and we do need to continue to do our part. I'll ask our clerk right now to complete a roll call of council so we can confirm everybody's attendance as we're coming to you electronically today. Madam Clerk?
Councillor Adshade.
Present.
Councillor Devine.
Present.
Councillor Mehta.
Present.
Councillor Mann.
Present.
Councillor Reid.
Present.
Councillor Wolf.
Present.
Mayor McGarry.
Present.
And Councillor Liggett has sent her regrets today.
Thank you. In addition, we're going to take a moment to welcome the staff that we have joining us today. Joining us electronically today, we have our city manager, David Calder, our deputy city managers, Cheryl Zonleiter, Hardy Bromberg, Yogesh Shah, and Dave Bush. Our chief financial officer, Cheryl Ayers. Our city solicitor, Lisa Shields. Our director of economic development, James Goodrum. Our director of communication, Suzanne Hiller. As well, today we have many staff joining us from our engineering, planning, and economic development divisions. So we thank you again for being with us today. Clerking the meeting today, we have our city clerk, Danielle Manton, and two new staff with the city of Cambridge, our council and committee coordinators, Alexandra Roddick and Briar Allison. So welcome and thank you for coming to us, to the city. Again, I also want to send a special thanks to our technology services staff, Greg Elgie, and his staff who assist in logistics for today's meeting. We would like to begin today by acknowledging that the land on which we gather today is the land traditionally used by the Haudenosaunee, Anishinaabe, and Neutral people. We also acknowledge the enduring presence and deep traditional knowledge and philosophies of the Indigenous people with whom we share this land today. And again, Council, as this is a virtual meeting, I'll ask that each member of Council who wishes to speak, press the raise hand feature on your video call, and the clerk and I will track the speakers list today and then invite you to speak. As a reminder to members of Council that if you've made declarations of pecuniary interest at a previous meeting, you will need to have to do so today for the bylaw related to the same item. So members of Council, are there any declarations of pecuniary interest? Seeing none, we'll move ahead. Regarding delegations, as a result of social distancing guidelines being in place, in-person public attendance at special meetings of Council is not currently available. However, the procedures for electronic participation during the course of an emergency do allow for the public to provide written submissions to the City Clerk's office in advance of the meeting for items on the agenda, and to also call in via telephone to our virtual meeting. This afternoon, we do have one registered delegation joining us virtually. So let's move to our first item for consideration this afternoon, which is the consent agenda. If a member of Council wishes to comment on any of the consent items, please let us know by pressing your raise hand feature. And in the interest of time, we'll look to vote on the consent procedure in a block. But again, if you wish to comment, you are welcome to do so. So Councillor Mann, I do believe that you have the motion and you're already unmuted, so take it away. Please read it in its entirety.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I do have the motion, and it's moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Mike Devine that all items listed under the heading of consent procedure for Tuesday, September 8th, 2020, Council agenda be adopted as recommended. Items number 1, Special Council minutes, August 25th, 2020. Number 2, Committee of Adjustment minutes, July 22nd, 2020. Item 3, Council information package, August 7, 2020. Item 7, Riverside Dam, resuming detailed design. Item 8, 2020 implementation plan for the Regional Transit Supportive Strategy, Cambridge. Item number 9, approval of the amended Grand River Source Protection Plan. Item 11, Council information package, September 4, 2020.
Thank you. And at this time, I see Councillor Reid has raised her hand. Councillor Reid, go ahead.
Thank you very much. I have 4 questions, so I don't know if you want me to just continue with the 4 or if someone else wants to intervene. So I'll start with on page 64, we talked about transparency. If you wanted to turn to that in your council agenda. We talked about that before, and it just was raised again through the report that came through on our strat plan. And I wanted to reiterate that I think it's really important through that particular one that we delve much more deeply into the issue of transparency. And I would like Brooke Lambert, if possible, to speak to what they might be able to do on that particular item.
No pressure, of course, but
I already told her.
I see that she's already unmuted, so please go ahead, Ms. Lambert.
Through the chair. Thank you for that question. And as we discussed at an earlier council meeting, the issue of transparency was raised through our community satisfaction survey. And we committed to council to look into that further, and you see the memo in front of you today. That said, we've also looked for ways that we could reach out to the public and find out more about what transparency means to them, because that is that can have many different meanings. And so one of the ways that we've decided to do that is in our engagement activities that are actually underway right now. We have designed a question that will be part of the Engage Cambridge survey platform. On September the 23rd, actually, there will be a specific question to the public about transparency. So we hope that we are able to gather more information that will be helpful in our strategic planning process, that will be provided to council, and that will give us some very concrete ways that we can begin to address that concern.
Thank you. Councillor Reid?
And to continue, much on the same vein really of transparency, because I think that the more transparent we are, the more that people feel that they can trust us. And when we're looking at the virtual public consultation format, I found it really interesting that on page 110, it talks about having the virtual consultations. And I wasn't really aware that we had that ability before COVID-19, but I see that we have had, and we would continue to do that. And it seems to allow people a greater opportunity to be a part of our consultation process. So I was really pleased to see that. If I could continue on item 8, the extension of the LRT into Cambridge. We know that it's been impacted by COVID-19, and the budget consideration has been impacted as well. And so what I was wondering, we have received for the last 10 years and up to 2021, $1 million a year to help us with our transit and to improve the transit, so we're ready for the LRT. Since we've been impacted financially with this, I'm just wondering if there's any possibility of that funding to extend beyond the 10 years rather. I don't know if there's anyone can answer that, or I know it's a regional one, but
it is a regional one, Councillor Reid. However, I know that our transportation staff, Shannon Noonan, is likely prepared to speak to this. Go ahead, Ms. Noonan. I saw that you unmuted somewhere.
Yes, thank you.
Go ahead.
Through the chair, the transit supportive strategy was intended to be funded until the year 2021. So we are moving forward, obviously, with those plans, but we will be starting some discussions with the region on what would happen beyond 2021, because we know that the transit supportive, that the stage 2 ION will not be implemented for a number of years beyond 2021. So we will be starting those discussions with the region.
Oh, thank you very much for that. That is excellent to hear that. I also wondered on item 9, we're going from 26 properties to 56 properties that will require a risk management plan for SALT applications. So are all 30 properties under the new plan? And what are the changes in the new plan?
Thank you. And I see Mr. Bromberg. Did you want to answer that? You're unmuted.
Certainly, most of the city properties are not impacted by the additional Grand River Source Protection Plan, because we are already committed to meeting those safety requirements. So it has very little impact to municipal parking lots.
Great, thank you.
Okay, is that it, Councillor Reid? Your
Yes.
hand's down? Good. Are there any other questions or comments from members of council? Seeing none, I think we're ready to call for the vote. Madam Clerk?
Councillor Adshate,
I in favor.
Councillor Devine,
Aye.
Councillor Mehta,
In favor.
Councillor Mann,
In favor?
Councillor Reid,
In favor.
Councillor Wolf,
In favor.
Mayor McGarry.
In favor.
That carries.
That's great. Thank you. So we'll now move on to consideration of reports. Our first item is item number 4, Strategic Plan 2020 to 2023, Phase 2 Council Workshop. So we do have Brooke Lambert, Director of Corporate Strategy, available for questions today. So are there any questions before we put the motion on the floor? Seeing none, I will ask Councillor Urmeta to put the motion on the floor. Please read it in its entirety.
Thank you, Your Worship. This motion is moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Mann. Item 4, Strategic Plan 2020 to 2023, Phase 2 Council Workshop. The recommendation is that Report 20-211 CRE, RE Strategic Plan 2020 to 2023, Phase 2 Council Workshop be received, and that Council direct the City Clerk to schedule a Council Workshop for Phase 2 to be held virtually between the dates of September 28th and October 2nd, 2020. 20-192 CRE request to amend development covenants and restrictions for the time of development. Oh, sorry, I'm looking at the
Yep.
no, sorry. And
you.
sorry, for development of Boxwood Business Campus September.
That was an error. So thank you, Councillor Urmeta.
Yeah, it looked kind of different. So thanks.
Okay, I see that we have a question for staff. Councillor Reid, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. My question is that around the agencies that we will be asking to contribute to this, our objectives and goals, and I'm wondering which agencies we might be approaching, and if that's the manner in which we're going to approach agencies, or we're just putting it out there and letting agencies that wish to respond.
Ms. Lambert, did you want to speak to that? Go ahead.
Through the chair. So we have looked at several different ways of engaging members of the community through this process, albeit digitally. And one of the ways that we have done this is to reach out to a list of about 170 engaged stakeholders. That includes agencies, businesses, public sector partners, all members of our advisory committees, not-for-profits, including arts and sports organizations. So quite an extensive list. We invited them to participate in a series of focus groups, and they were actually completed just last week. So we are now compiling that information. Those people who participated will be invited back to a sense-making session, likely later in September, and we'll be including all of that information for Council's consideration. In addition to that, we've reached out to the entire community, and so part of our social media approach has been to put surveys and other things, other questions on our Engage Cambridge platform. And then again, using the results of the community satisfaction survey, that was another way that we reached out to the entire community, essentially, to get information that will be used throughout this process.
Thank you very much. And it probably is incumbent upon us as councillors to encourage people to submit their ideas as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any further comment or questions from members of council? Seeing none, does council have any comments at this time? Any comments? And seeing none, I think I would like to add my own. And I wanted to thank Brooke Lambert and her staff, as well as everybody that has contributed to our strategic planning for the next few years. And I did want to remind the community, it has been not easy to get to this point. If you consider last year, we were under regional review, so we weren't even sure most of 2019 how our region and how our city might look after the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing had done a regional review. And then of course, COVID hit. So it's not as easy to do a strategic plan with not only the city, but with all of our partners in this time period, and we were interrupted. So I did want to give my thanks on a job well done to get us to this point. And I am really looking forward to the future rather than looking in the past. So everything else was BC before COVID, and now we've got an opportunity to be optimistic and look ahead. So thank you so much so far for the work that you've done. And I really do encourage our community to come out and give us your best ideas. Thanks. And seeing no further comments, I'm going to ask Madam Clerk to call for the vote. Madam Clerk?
Councillor Adshape,
In favor.
Councillor Devine,
In favor.
Councillor Meta,
In favor.
Councillor Mann,
In favor?
Councillor Reid,
In favor.
Councillor Wolf,
In favor?
Mayor McGarry,
In favor.
and that carries.
That's great. Thank you. So we'll move ahead now to our next item, which is number 5, the Core Areas Transformation Fund, or CATF for short, the Community Improvement Plan. And this is really great news going ahead. I'm excited for this item. So we now have Cheryl Zonleiter, our Deputy City Manager for Corporate Enterprise, as well as Trevor McWilliams, our Manager of Business Development from Economic Development, here with us today. So Cheryl's going to provide us with an introduction, and Trevor will then provide us with an overview of the report before we move ahead. So welcome, Cheryl. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. Through you, the chair, we're very pleased to be before council this afternoon with a report which sets out our plan to update the community improvement plan for the core areas. As part of our economic response plan, as well as the city's commitment to the core areas with the recent Core Area Transformation Fund, the city is looking for additional ways in which we can support local businesses. An update to our community improvement plan will ultimately expand the menu of incentive programs which are available to business owners. And now I'll turn it over to Mr. McWilliams for an overview of the plan as set out in our report. Thank you.
Thank you, Cheryl, very much. Mary McGarry, members of council and senior staff, my name is Trevor McWilliams and I am the Manager of Business Development with the Invest Cambridge team for the City of Cambridge. Today, it is my pleasure to present to you a report which seeks council's permission to initiate the Community Improvement Plan process by redesignating Cambridge's core areas as community improvement project areas. This will allow staff to create new financial incentives to encourage greater investment in the core areas. Council will recall that the current financial incentives offered within the core areas were created in the mid-1990s and are now quite dated. So what is a community improvement plan and why do we create them? A community improvement plan, commonly referred to as a CIP, is quite simply a document used to support and encourage physical improvement in the city. The CIP delineates an area within which the municipality hopes to drive investment in a comprehensive manner. Section 28 of the Planning Act provides powers to municipalities to develop financial incentives such as grants and loans to private property owners to undertake improvement projects. In the absence of a designated CIP area, the provisioning of funds to private businesses would normally be considered bonusing and would not be permitted. What is a community improvement project area? All community improvement plans start by setting the boundary of an area that is being studied for improvement. This is called a project area. It keeps the study focused by specifying where financial incentives that appear in a community improvement plan may be spent. The report before council requesting designation of community improvement project areas is the first step in initiating a new CIP. Council initiates the community improvement plan and adopts it when it is finished. In most cases, provincial government must approve a CIP after council adopts it. The actual study work and writing of the plan will be done by city staff. The Planning Act requires at least one public meeting be held before a community improvement plan is adopted by council. In essence, this is a way of making sure the community has input into the community improvement plan. However, staff will be utilizing several methods of obtaining feedback, including stakeholder groups and the Economic Development Advisory Committee, as you know as EDAC. How long does it take? Community improvement plans can take a few months or a few years to complete, depending on factors such as how large a project area is, how complex the issues are, and what kind of resources are available to do the work. The Planning Act sets no legal time limit for completing a CIP. However, the Invest Cambridge team are hopeful that the new CIP and associated incentives will be completed sometime in mid to late 2021, barring any further planet-wide emergencies. But in conclusion, Council will recall that one of the main pillars of the recently approved Core Areas Transformation Fund was specifically created to establish a CIP to stimulate transformative investment and to support city building in the Cambridge core areas. This report is the first step in initiating that process. Thank you so much for your time, and I'm pleased to answer any questions that Council may have.
Thank you very much, both to Cheryl and Trevor. And I think just before we move to questions for staff, I think we'll put the motion on the floor first. Councillor Devine, I believe that you have the motion. Will you please read it in its entirety?
Give me a second here. Let me find it. Well, it would seem I can't find it on my BlackBerry. Just give me 1 second, please.
Okay, if you can't find it, I'll have Madam Clerk read it out.
Sure, please,
Okay.
and thank you.
Madam Clerk?
Thank you. That report 20083 CRE Core Area Transformation Fund, CATF, Community Improvement Plan regarding the process for implementing a community improvement plan for financial incentives be received. And that Council pass the attached bylaw designating the identified core areas as community improvement project areas. And that City staff prepare a draft community improvement plan for public consultation and input, and that the current core area incentives continue until the implementation of the new core area incentives arising out of this community improvement plan process. And further, that City staff prepare a future report to Council about the recommended community improvement plan and public input received.
Thank you. So I have a number of questions, and I see Councillor Devine, since you moved the motion, did you want to go first? And then I have Councillor Reid and Councillor Wolf. Go ahead, Councillor Devine.
Yes, please, and thank you through the chair. A question to staff. If we approve this tonight, after staff gets it written up with all the what needs to be required, will this be coming back to City Council prior to, once the document is written?
Through you, Madam Mayor, to Councillor Devine. That is correct, Councillor Devine. This is just the very first step of actually picking the areas in which the CIP will be effective. This is not an approval process. It's actually just picking the areas. We have to go forward and have public meetings. We have to draft a new plan. It will have to come back to council as well for final approval. We will also be giving update reports on the process to make sure that council is fully aware of where we are at.
Okay, now follow-up question, if I may, Madam Mayor.
Go ahead.
On the documents that we have right here on page, I think in page 132, 133, and 134, there's maps of the core areas in all three cases, Gulf, Preston, and Hesper. What would have to be done to change these core areas? And in my case, I would be talking about expanding them. What would have to be done, Trevor?
Through you, Madam Mayor, the core areas are actually designated in the City of Cambridge official plan. To change the boundaries of the core areas, you would require an official plan amendment. The city would have to initiate that to change those boundaries of those core areas. The community improvement plan actually is not cemented in the core areas. We could go larger with the community improvement plan, but that would mean we would have to designate a different area than what is in the official plan at this particular time. But if you actually wanted to move the boundaries of the core areas themselves, it would be a city initiated official plan amendment.
Thank you very much, Trevor. That's all I have in my regard. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you. Councillor Reid and then Councillor Wolf. Councillor Reid.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think that Mike and I were thinking along the same lines as I was looking at the Hespeler boundaries. And I know that we have been considering the Hespeler BIA for some time of trying to add to the boundaries and extend it. And certainly I know that Forefathers is interested in having being a part of the BIA. And I looked at these boundaries and it wouldn't include them. And I think you've answered it to some degree, Trevor, but if you could just say it again, even though it isn't an official boundary, those areas that beyond there could be included in the CIP. Did I hear you correctly?
Through you, Madam Mayor, to Councillor Reid. That is correct. If council wished and desired, and the study came back showing that the CIP was to be greater in area, we certainly could designate additional land area to the CIP. It is not constrained by the core areas themselves. The reason why we have chosen the core areas, of course, is that the existing financial incentives are completely within the existing core areas. And that's why we wanted to redesignate these areas at this time. Just to move the core area boundary itself, though, would require the official plan amendment. But just to also further, Councillor Reid, the BIA area is a third area that absolutely could be moved, but it would have to go through the appropriate process in the Municipal Act to expand the BIA area, and that is available to us as well.
Yeah, and I'd just like to add, there's nothing that precludes expanding the Hespeler BIA as a result of this report tonight or the official plan.
Yeah, well, I think, the plans are in the works, but even as we're talking about this, I would like to, I don't know if it requires a motion or not, but like to, at least for the purposes of looking at this CIP, that we include the Forefathers on Guelph Avenue. Do we go that far?
Through the mayor, we can take that as staff direction. So that'll be part of our communications and part of the consultation that Trevor alluded to earlier. Because I imagine there'll be other other properties and other core areas that people would like us to consider. So we'll report back to council on those, and we'll take it as direction right now to look at expanding to the Forefathers property.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Goodrum. No further questions, Councillor Reid?
Nope.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Wolf and then Councillor Devine. Councillor Wolf.
Through you, Madam Mayor. Trevor, originally when we created this fund or moved this money from economic development, it was to help, or we were thinking of the expansion of the School of Architecture, which seems to be on hold. So do you expect projects to be identified by 2021? So I guess I'm concerned that do we spend all this money and then when we have a big project that we really want to support, the 20 million is gone?
Through you, Madam Mayor, to Councillor Wolf. Councillor Wolf, this is actually the CIP is actually separate from the projects for the Core Areas Transformation Fund. The report, the report before you tonight is simply to designate those areas. You'll recall that under the Core Areas Transformation Fund, one of those pillars was to initiate financial incentives. And that's what this particular report is doing now. That doesn't preclude people coming forward now. If they have projects, they can come forward tomorrow to staff if they have something, an idea for the Core Areas Transformation Fund.
Right. I understand that this doesn't have anything to do with the project. Just, I guess I'm concerned that we have several projects and then there's no money when we have a big commitment. So that's all.
Thank you, Councillor.
Councillor Devine, go ahead.
Yes, thank you through the chair. Yeah, there's no doubt that forefathers should be included in that, as Councillor Reid had said. But the other thing that I think we need to reach out to is the old Lens Mill building, which is ways down Queen Street. That will be that will be commercial. It is getting redeveloped, and I think that area to that point should be also added in as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Devine. We'll take that into consideration as well and report back.
Thank you, Mr. Goodwin.
Thank you. Are there further questions from members of council? Seeing none, again, I wanted to thank you all for this report. I think that under the circumstances, as we're looking forward to economic recovery in the city of Cambridge, post-COVID or during this pandemic, this is really good news. And I think the community improvement plan will certainly add to this as we go forward, so that we know that even in the meantime, if projects go forward, that we're looking after the economic development future for our residents. So thank you again for this, and we'll look forward to the next stage of the report. I think at this time, last call for questions or comments. And seeing none, I think we're ready for the vote now. Madam Clerk?
Councillor Adshade.
In favor.
Councillor Devine.
Aye.
Councillor Mehta.
In favor.
Councillor Mann.
In favor?
Councillor Reid.
In favor.
Councillor Wolf.
In favor.
Mayor McGarry.
In favor.
And that carries.
Okay, we'll move on now to our next item, which is item number 6. Request to amend development covenants and restrictions for the time for development Boxwood Business Campus. So before we move for any questions on this item, I will ask that Councillor Wolf place the motion on the floor. Councillor Wolf, go ahead. Please read it in its entirety.
Through you, Madam Mayor, moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Mehta. Request to amend development covenants and restrictions for the time for development Boxwood Business Campus. That report 20-192 CRE request to amend development covenants and restrictions for the time for development Boxwood Business Campus be received, and that council authorize the mayor and clerk to execute documentation to amend the development covenants and restrictions to allow for a 1-year extension to the construction start date and a 1-year extension to the substantial completion date without penalties to be granted to business developers noted in attachment 1 to this report, subject to the satisfaction of the city solicitor.
Thank you. Are there any questions of council for staff at this time? Okay, Councillor Devine, go ahead.
Thank you, through the chair. And this is to staff. This is just because of the COVID situation, is that correct? Because of the delays through COVID only and COVID only? Is that correct?
Through the mayor, that is correct, or we're doing this proactively. I do want to note, however, that I do not believe that all the developments are going to require this extension. We have 2 in site plan right now, and one of these is currently under construction. Businesses have run into some issues because of COVID around financing projects, around the availability of trades, and as well as some of our own permitting processes. Things are taking longer these days to work through the development pipeline.
Okay, that's fine. I understand that. And it's COVID related only, because I believe there was somebody came to council a year ago and was looking for an extension. So this has to be made very clear that this is COVID related only.
And through the mayor, that is correct, Councillor Devine. The matter that you're referring to definitely that that project itself and the issues around that are not COVID related, and we're working through that with the property owner as well at this time.
Okay, that's good. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Are there any further questions from members of council? Seeing none, are there any comments from members of council? And seeing none, since Councillor Devine asked my question, I think if there's nothing further, then we're ready for the vote. We're ready for the vote. Madam Clerk?
Councillor Adshade.
In favor.
Councillor Devine.
Aye.
Councillor Mehta.
In favor.
Councillor Mann.
In favor.
Councillor Reid.
In favor.
Councillor Wolf.
In favor.
Mayor McGarry.
In favor.
And that carries.
Okay, thank you. We'll move ahead now to item number 10, the resolution of the Council of the City of Cambridge supporting local journalism. We do have one pre-registered delegation for this item, who is Christian Agard. So I'll ask that we're patient while we make arrangements for our delegate to join our meeting. And once the delegate does join our meeting, they'll have 5 minutes to speak to this item. As everyone is aware, at this time, our rules do not permit in-person delegations, but will permit electronic submissions received in advance of the meeting, as well as pre-registered delegates that can call into our meetings to speak to items on the special council meeting agenda. So we're trying to contact the delegate at this point, have them access our meeting, invite them to speak. So again, I'll ask for your patience while our staff take a moment to make this happen. But will permit electronic submissions in advance of the meeting, as well as pre-registered delegates that can call into our meeting to speak to items on the special council meeting agenda. So we're trying to contact the delegate at this point, have them access our meeting, invite them to speak. So again, I'll ask for your patience while our staff take a moment to make this happen. Christian, it's Mayor Catherine McGarry.
Hi, Mayor. How are you doing? I'm
Great.
here.
I hear you, and there is a 20 to 30 second delay between real time and what's reported. So I'm just going to ask you to turn off the recording or turn it way down so it doesn't throw us off here.
All right, hang on 1 second and I will do exactly that. That is done. It's all
Thank
down.
you. Okay, so just give me a moment to introduce you and thank you. It's a long time no hear from, so glad you can join us today to delegate. And a reminder that you'll have 5 minutes to address council. Please ensure that your remarks relate directly to the agenda item you're speaking to. Otherwise, we might ask you to end your remarks. We do have rules of engagement in council meetings and ask that you ensure that your remarks are respectful and that you refrain from asking questions of council. I'll advise you when your 5 minutes is up, at which time council may have questions for you, and I'll guide you through that process. So welcome again, Christian, and you now have 5 minutes to speak to this item. Go ahead, please.
Thanks very much. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Christian Agard. I live at 48 Hahn Avenue up here in Cambridge, in Hespeler. And today I'm speaking on behalf of inkstainedwretches.org. It's an organization that formed of, I guess, mostly retired journalists from the Record. It has since expanded out to include retired journalists from other places. And primarily the concern was raised back at the start of the COVID crisis and earlier about the state of local journalism and cutbacks, closures, all that sort of stuff that has a direct impact on the coverage of local communities. And so that in mind, the group decided that not to remain silent on this, but to start action. And so it is kicked off petition, and it is also going around with the resolution that's before you to councils in Ontario and across Canada. And I can tell you that among here in Waterloo region, I think the region of Waterloo has approved it. The city of Waterloo endorsed it. The townships have endorsed it. It's going to Kitchener at some point in the near future, I believe. And now here it's at Cambridge. It has been to Kingston. It's done its rounds across Ontario. And the primary concern is that closures and the loss of local media means that there's an erosion, I think, of civic well-being, and which means that institutions aren't being covered that well. City halls aren't being covered that well. There are thousands of jobs in the media, as you know, that are at risk. Many of them have disappeared, and which has really brought us to this crisis at this moment. And so I guess what we're looking for is not cash from local municipalities, but a vote of support. Just putting the senior levels of government, which do have sort of more sway over some financial support for this industry, just putting them on notice that local governments see this, are aware of this as a problem, and would like the federal and perhaps provincial bodies to engage in the problem and offer some support to local media. Just by way, I think the whereases and whatnot of the resolution before you sort of sketch out quite well the problem. And but just for some more recent stuff, I can tell you that just a couple of weeks ago, the Canadian Association of Broadcasters released its own report on the economy of the private radio stations and television market, and predicted that perhaps within 4 to 6 months, 50 radio stations would disappear off the Canadian landscape, disappear off the airways. Most of them would be on the AM band. And perhaps beyond that, in the immediate future beyond that, you could be looking at as many as 150 radio stations that will disappear. And within that same time period, you might lose up to 14 private television stations. So they too, this isn't just a print journalism thing. This is very much a media endeavor. We're all sort of saying the same thing. Local news coverage is in jeopardy unless we get some sort of support. That is basically the gist of my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions from you.
Thank you, Christian, and I really appreciate your delegation today. It is an important topic. Are there questions from members of council at this time? Seeing none, I have one. I'll take the chair's privilege, Christian, and I know that this resolution came to regional council earlier this summer, and glad it's here before us today. But there has been a concern, just even pre-COVID, but certainly during this time period, about accurate media coverage of factual information that the community needs in order to take into their own circumstances and to sort of know what's going on and what's expected of them, and in particular during these states of emergencies that have been called by area municipalities, as well as within the province. So, and I know that you've been at this a long time in many different communities, and I've always appreciated your writing and your coverage. But are there, with this worrisome news that we may be losing more journalism stations and media sites, what does that mean for the general resident who may then just have to turn to social media like Facebook or Instagram for their news? What does that really mean in the long run if we're to lose this journalism for our residents?
I think that, even before COVID, I think we were already seeing there was certainly a sharp decline in media, and that's attributed to many things, including the rise of social media. Not that and media uses social media. That's the irony. I think it's not only it has been both a blessing and a bane, really, but I think that when local media outlets, radio stations and newspapers and television stations, they have accountability. I mean, it's easy for somebody to sit in their living room in their basement and throw up a website and comment critically often, and to promote hoaxes and whatnot. But in local media, you're actually dealing with organizations that do have ethical standards that they are compelled to follow, and there is accountability. If they get a story wrong, there's the possibility of libel action. And if not libel action, there's the possibility of being brought up in front of an editor and having to account for the fact that the facts in a certain story were wrong. And that really doesn't exist in a a landscape where that is moved by influencers and strange, unusual individuals who, like I say, get to hide behind unusual names and work from their basements and concoct all kinds of theories. So the value of a local media is the fact that there is this accountability, and that's its great strength. And I think one of the things that's happened in the current pandemic situation is that the studies that showed, have been some media studies on it, that people have turned to, believe it or not, have turned to local media for correct information. Because at the start of this pandemic situation, there was so much misinformation going around that people did seek out and find more plausible, credible information from the trained journalists that were going out and gathering the information. I mean, that's the big thing here is A, accountability, and B, the fact that the news is being created and resourced by trained individuals. I hope that answers your question somewhat.
It really does, and really along that, and as again, I appreciate your writing. I've followed you for many years now. I think since I first moved here 32 years ago. But you bring up a good point in not only accountability, but I know that all of us politicians at all levels of government are really struggling to get out accurate, factual messages to our community. And I find here there is just so much noise and often incorrect information or information that's put out there with somebody's deeply held belief that may be quite divisive from somebody else's deeply personal belief. And even things in our media are now almost like referendum questions. And so it sort of brings me back to the point that you made. And my question would be along those lines. When it comes to that accountability, and especially with local media, do you find that the relationship that our reporters in any of the media markets have with our area politicians and their comms department really makes a difference to ensure that what that particular community needs for information that's accurate really does get reported on?
Well, first of all, I'll qualify a couple of things. One thing is that I am amongst the ink-stained wretches who has retired or at least left the business. I left the business about 8 years ago, and I'm soon to retire from another business. So there you go. However, I do follow this thing fairly closely. And what I would say is that there's always, in a good news relationship with reporters and with the institutions that they cover, there should be a little bit of distance, and it should be a little bit adversarial, because you don't want reporters being simply stenographers of what the institutions are doing. They want to ask critical questions, and they want to report critically, cover different aspects of a story. And I think that is just it, is that a trained journalist has the obligation to report with an eye to in doing the best for the reader. Like, here's one side of the story, here's the other side of the story. You as a reader need to fall, pick your spot. Whereas if you're just a commentator working under a mysterious byline of some sort, a social media byline, you don't have to worry about the other side of things. You don't have to worry about the facts. You can just simply spout off anything that comes to your mind on that particular topic. That's the risk. And that's what's basically at jeopardy here with the loss of local media, is the fact that you don't get that informed reporting, and therefore you end up with a public that is, I think, even more confused or inclined to just sort of latch on to whatever theory or hoax or whatever that appeals to their own thinking.
Thank you. And I think that that's quite true. So thank you very much for your presentation today. I'll just do a last call to see if there's any further questions from members of council. And seeing none, again, I want to thank you for coming to delegate today, and you're certainly welcome to follow along this item and the rest of council meeting on our City of Cambridge YouTube channel. So thanks again, Christian.
Well, much thanks for listening to the presentation and taking a look at this particular resolution. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, now I think we're ready for the motion. Councillor Mann, you have the motion in front of you. Please read it in its entirety.
I do, Madam Chair, and it's quite lengthy. And it's moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Devine. And the recommendation is, whereas a healthy professional news media is essential for the proper functioning of a civil society and democracy at the local, regional, federal, and international levels. And whereas the Public Policy Forum declares on its website for the 2017 report, The Shattered Mirror, News, Democracy, and Trust in the Digital Age, commissioned by the federal government, that real news is in crisis in this country. And whereas the U.S. Federal Communications Commission, FCC, cited 8 critical information needs the media help to provide, including emergencies, other public risk to health, education, the environment, economic opportunities, civil and political knowledge of our policy initiatives, and the conduct of public officials and candidates for office. The Shattered Mirror, page 4. And whereas Canadians have lost the essential services provided by roughly 2,000 media workers in 100 communities across Canada due to layoffs in only 6 weeks from the time the COVID-19 pandemic began, a time it became clearer to the public how important it is for Canadians to receive accurate information, and advertising revenues have plunged, promoting an emergency $30 million advertising buy-in by the federal government. And whereas residents of 190 Canadian municipalities, Canadian communities, including residents of Kitchener, Elmira, and Guelph, lost 250 established news outlets due to closings of mergers between 2008 and 2018. Whereas nearly 2/3 of Canadians agree or somewhat agree that because of the coronavirus COVID-19 outbreak, the federal government should treat widespread media bankruptcies and layoffs as an emergency, according to the Nanos Research Poll of April 2020. And whereas the federal government allocated nearly $600 million in aid for Canadian media over 5 years in its 2019 budget, including a 25% tax credit for newsroom salaries, a 15% tax credit for digital media subscribers, and charitable tax status for non-profit news outlets. And whereas Canada's federal government acknowledged in its 2019 budget, page 173, that a strong and independent news media is critical to a well-functioning democracy. And whereas the news media in Waterloo Region have been instrumental during the COVID-19 pandemic, ensuring local citizens have accurate local information. Therefore, be it resolved that Cambridge Council recognizes that a healthy professional news media is essential to the proper functioning of democracy in our city. Urges nearby municipal councils and those across Canada to recognize that a robust news media is essential to the proper functioning of a democracy in their jurisdictions. Endorses legislation and regulations to support and rejuvenate news outlets across Canada. Urges the federal government to move quickly to pass legislation to ensure an ecosystem for a healthy news media to serve all Canadians, and that the resolution be forwarded to area municipalities, local MPs and MPPs, and the Federation of Canadian Municipalities and Association of Municipalities of Ontario.
Thank you. Now you can take a breath or two. Thank you. And I'll go to comments now from members of council. And I see Councillor Wolfe followed by Councillor Reid. Councillor Wolfe.
Through you, Madam Mayor, I strongly support this motion and agree that for democracy to work well, we need an accurately informed public and an accountable local media. And I'm glad to hear that though Christian Agard has left the business, his son has joined it, and you hear his work on CBC. Thank you.
Interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Councillor Reid.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Mayor. Yes, I also strongly support this motion. I feel it's very important because I have fears that too many people are relying on social media as their source for their news, and that is truly frightening because there's just too much on social media that is not really giving the true picture of what is happening. And I do believe that for our democracy to thrive, we need a good a good media of journalists. And so I'm really very supportive of this and hope that everyone will support it as well.
Thank you. Councillor Mann, sorry, I should have gone to you first, but go ahead, Councillor Mann.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I needed to catch my breath. But I strongly support this motion too. We've seen that it's more obvious than ever that accurate, tested, and proven information is necessary today. It's absolutely necessary that we have that tried, tested, and true information, and this is how we get it. So there's no question in my mind that this is a motion that needs to be supported by myself.
Thank you. Further comments from members of council? Seeing none, I will add one to myself. What a surprise there. But it was really to strongly support this motion. As we have seen in COVID, people have been hanging on the news conferences that have been underway, both federally, provincially, as well as here in Waterloo Region. And I just really wanted to give my own shout out to all of our media outlets in Waterloo Region who have done an exemplary job for reporting on the COVID-19 pandemic, for running stories that are pertinent to our citizens, and who have continued. Sorry, I had my mic down, but I really wanted to again give a shout out to our media outlets who have done an accurate job of reporting. I know that on various occasions I've been in pretty well all of the news media, giving updates from a Cambridge perspective every so often, and even 570 News had one of the 3 urban mayors on every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday over the sort of the spring and summer to give a regional or a city update. But again, I wanted to say that I'm in strong support of this motion. And with that, we can go ahead to the vote. Madam Mayor or Madam Clerk.
Councillor Adshade.
In favor.
Councillor Devine.
Aye.
Councillor Mehta.
In favor.
Councillor Mann.
In favor.
Councillor Reid.
In favor.
Councillor Wolf.
In favor.
Mayor McGarry.
In favor.
And that carries.
That's great. Thank you. All right, on to our next session, and I'm going to call for a motion to consider matters in closed session. And Councillor Devine, I believe that you have this motion. Please read it in its entirety. Councillor Devine.
Yeah, I'd read it if I had it. Maybe Danielle could read it out on my behalf, please.
Yep, we'll have Madam Clerk to read it out. Thanks.
Bear with me. Do I have this here? Bear with me. That in accordance with Section 239 2B of the Municipal Act 2001, Council to convene in closed session to consider the following subject matter: personnel matters about identifiable individual, including municipal employees, confidential HR matter. Moved by Councillor Devine, seconded by Councillor Adshade.
Thank you very much. And now I think we're ready for the vote. So, Madam Clerk.
Councillor Adshade.
In favor.
Councillor Devine.
Aye.
Councillor Mehta.
In favor.
Councillor Mann.
In favor.
Councillor Reid.
In favor.
Councillor Wolf.
In favor.
Mayor McGarry.
In favor.
and that carries.
Thank you. So we'll now be moving on to our closed meeting agenda. I'd remind council members and staff to place your microphones on mute. We'll be placing a sign on screen to note that we're in closed session. So bear with us and we'll see you back in a little while. Okay, welcome back everyone to our special council meeting. I will now ask council for a motion to rise from closed session. Councillor Reid, I believe that you have the motion. Would you please read it in its entirety? Go ahead, Councillor Reid.
I have asked our clerk to please read it for me.
Okay, Madam Clerk.
Moved by Councillor Reid, seconded by Councillor Wolf, that council rise from closed session and reconvene in open session.
Thank you, and I will now ask our clerk to call for the vote. Madam Clerk.
Councillor Adshade.
In favor.
Councillor Devine.
This is just come back into open session? We're
That's
voting on it?
correct.
In favor. Thank you.
Councillor Mehta.
In favor.
Councillor Mann.
In favor.
Councillor Reid.
In favor.
Councillor Wolf.
In favor.
Mayor McGarry.
In favor.
And that carries.
Thank you. And I just wanted to note that during the closed session, discussions occurred amongst members of council pertaining to a confidential HR matter. So thank you all for your patience. Now we'll move ahead and understand that Councillor Reid has a notice of motion listed on the other business memo. And Councillor Reid, I believe that you're requesting that council consider waiving notice to address this motion at today's meeting. So at this time, I'd ask.
No, I wasn't. No, I wasn't asking for waiving. I would like it to go in the next one.
Okay.
Okay. Sorry for the confusion.
Yep, hang on.
But I do have a seconder for the notice of motion.
You don't need a seconder to do that.
Okay.
Yeah, so at this time, you go ahead and you can proceed with your notice of motion. Councillor Reid, go ahead.
I would ask the clerk to please read it for me.
Okay, Madam Clerk.
Thank you. Sorry for the confusion there, Councillor Reid. Whereas the City of Cambridge, as a provider of services and an employer, aspires to achieve an environment free of prohibited discrimination and harassment and to ensure respect for diversity and inclusion. And whereas the City of Cambridge has adopted the Stronger Together Diversity, Accessibility and Inclusion Action Plan as of July 10th, 2018, committing to respecting diversity and inclusion of all people. Be it resolved that the City of Cambridge reaffirms its support of the Ontario Human Rights Code regarding the prohibition of discrimination and harassment based on social and economic status, disability, including mental health and addiction, and receipt of public assistance in housing.
Thank you. So Councillor Reid, this motion will be listed on the agenda to be considered at the September 22nd, 2020 council meeting. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, council, we'll now move on to introduction and consideration of bylaws. And Councillor Mehta, I believe you have this motion. Please read it in its entirety.
Thank you, Your Worship. This motion is moved by myself. And it's seconded by Councillor Wolf, item 20-082, being a bylaw of the City of Cambridge to dedicate certain lands as public highway (Allendale Road). Thank you.
Thank you. And I'll now ask our clerk to call for the vote. Madam Clerk.
Councillor Adshade.
In favor.
Councillor Devine.
Aye.
Councillor Mehta.
In favor.
Counselor Mann,
In favor?
Counselor Reid,
In favor.
Counselor Wolf,
In favor?
Mayor McGarry,
In favor.
and that carries.
Thank you. Well, Council, we've now reached the end of our reports agenda. So Councillor Mann, I believe that you have the notice of motion or the motion for our close of meeting. So please read it in its entirety.
Thank you, Your Worship. I do, and I've made it up because I didn't have any wording, so forgive me if I'm wrong. But it's moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Wolf, that the special council meeting of Tuesday, September 8th does now adjourn at 5:32 p.m.
Thank you. And I'm going to have to hold because I forgot the confirmatory bylaw. So you'll have to make it all up again in just a moment.
Okay, I'll just retract that.
Will you withdraw it? Thank you. We'll get it right at some point. Okay, so we'll go to the confirmatory bylaw, and I believe Councillor Reid, you have the motion. So I'll have yourself or Madam Clerk read it out.
Madam Clerk, read it, please.
Thank you.
Bear with me for a moment. .083 being a bylaw of the City of Cambridge to confirm the proceedings of Council of the Corporation of the City of Cambridge at its meeting held on the 8th day of September 2020, passed and enacted on the 8th day of September 2020. Motion to be moved by Councillor Reid and seconded by Councillor Mehta.
Thank you. Sorry for the confusion. And seeing no further comments, I'll now ask our clerk to call for the vote. Madam Clerk?
Councillor Adshade.
In favor?
Councillor Devine.
Aye.
Councillor Mehta.
In favor?
Councillor Mann.
In favor?
Councillor Reid.
In favor?
Councillor Wolf.
In favor?
Mayor McGarry.
In favor.
And that carries.
Okay, that really is the end of our reports agenda. So Councillor Mann, I'm quite sure you'll remember the and recall the, oh, hang on for a second. I see Councillor Reid's hand up. Councillor Reid, sorry.
Thank you. Thank you. I just wanted to comment and thank our technology staff for taking care of us so well, and particularly me today, because my internet was down and they managed to get me on here. Believe me, I'm astounded. So thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you. And just before I go to the close of meeting, I did want to say goodbye to James Hudson, who's been our Deputy City Clerk for some time now, and just a huge thank you for all that you've done, especially during COVID, when our department was down to only a couple of people before our new recruits started. So I just wanted to say thank you from myself, from council, from staff, for looking after us so well and being our rock through this period of time. I know that all of us, including Madam Clerk, has really depended on you. So thank you. Now we really are ready for the close of meeting. Councillor Mann.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And it's moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Wolf, that the special council meeting of Tuesday, September 8th does now adjourn at 5:36 p.m.
Okay, Madam Clerk, I'll get you to call for the vote. Go ahead.
Councillor Adshade.
In favor?
Councillor Devine.
Aye.
Councillor Mehta.
In favor?
Councillor Mann.
In favor?
Councillor Reid.
In favor?
Councillor Wolf.
In favor?
Mayor McGarry.
In favor.
And that carries.
Thank you. So that concludes our meeting for today, and thanks for joining us. And a reminder to stay safe, Cambridge. Please look after each other. Meeting adjourned.
Aye.
Goodbye.
everyone.